There's an old saying that says, without vision, the people perish. So Moses is out in the middle of the wilderness for how many years tending sheep? 40 years. So he's out there for 40 years tending sheep. Do you think he was thinking it was time for a change? You know, I don't think so. I think he'd settled into a routine. I don't think that Moses was sending out any resumes. Anybody here ever been on a job search? Now that can be pleasant or unpleasant. It's mostly pleasant for narcissists because they like being interviewed. But Moses was not looking for another job when all of a sudden something really interesting happened in the wilderness. He's walking, it appears, in the wilderness, and he sees something come up, and it appears to be, to him, fire. Now keep in mind that Moses is a person who's never seen an incandescent light bulb. Did you know Moses lived before Thomas Edison? So Moses has never seen a light bulb. He's never seen an arc light. He's never seen a tungsten carbide light. He's never seen any of those kind of lights. So all he's ever seen is fire that makes light during the day. That's all he's ever seen. And so he describes this as a bush burning with fire. And here's God. It says the angel of the Lord, which in the Old Testament means God. So here's God hiding in a bush. Why would God hide in a bush? He would hide in a bush so that we didn't have the problem that we had down there in Tarsus, Saul of Tarsus had at Damascus on the road. That is where God appears and everybody goes blind. So God didn't want to blind Moses, so he's hiding in this bush. It says Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock into the back of the desert, and he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire in the midst of the bush, and he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. So I don't think it was a fire. I think it was much brighter than a fire. Has anybody ever watched somebody arc weld? Have you ever seen a welding? I mean, that's a pretty bright deal, right? They even make, in the old days, they made lighthouses with arc lights in them. An arc is a very bright thing, but I don't think that's as bright as God was in the bush. I think it was an arc light times 1,000 or 1,000,000 or something. And it was so bright that if God hadn't hidden it behind the bush, Moses would have had the Saul experience of being blinded. And Moses sees this, and he says, I'll now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. And so the Lord saw that he had turned aside to look. He called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. I mean, what else would you really say? And the Lord said, don't draw near the place. Don't get too close. Don't get too close. Take your shoes off, for where you're standing is holy ground. And that's another message for another day that we ought to study that text. Moreover, he said, I'm the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now, hang on. What did Moses know about this God? How old was Moses? 80. He had spent 40 years in the desert with the guy from Midian. And before that, he'd spent 40 years in Egypt, some of which was spent at his mother's knee, right? And some of it was spent in the schools getting a master's degree in Egyptian history and life, right? So he may even had a PhD in Egyptian life because he was clearly going to be in line to be Pharaoh. And therefore, he'd get the best education Egypt had to offer. So he's now having to reach back 70 years to what his mother taught him about the God of his fathers. He's reaching back in time and he's trying to remember, okay, I remember all the stories. I know the history of our people. I know who we were and who we are, and we're God's people. This is the God, God says, I want you to know. And when Moses realized this, he hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, I've certainly seen the oppression of my people. Remember what he said. I, God, have seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up from the land to a good and large land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivitites and the Jebusites. Now, therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come now, therefore, and I will send you. You see the irony there? All this, I've got it. I'm going to take care of this problem. I'm going to take care of everything. I know all what's going on now. Your turn. I'm going to send you into the meat grinder to get it done. He says, I'm going to send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Without a vision, the people perished. Moses had been in the wilderness with the sheep long enough. It was now time. I found a great quote. It said, the great offer of the gospel is adventure. See, here we live in a world in which we want all of our adventures candy-coated. I see on Facebook all the time videos of roller coaster rides. People apparently like to strap a camera on their head and do a roller coaster ride. And I think, is there any more artificial entertainment than that? You strap yourself into something that's quite safe, not perfectly safe, but quite safe. In fact, you wouldn't do it if it wasn't safe. You strap yourself into a machine that's safe, and it twists you around to make you feel unsafe in a safe environment. Is there anything more artificial than that? I mean, at least NASCAR drivers risk death, right? On a roller coaster, you're just in an artificial scare environment. Now, I'm not putting down roller coasters. If you want to do a roller coaster, that's great. You go do one. All I'm saying is, don't make me do it because I will erp on you, but you go ahead and do your roller coaster, have a good time, but just know that that's as artificial an environment almost as watching it on YouTube. Moses was out there living, but was he really living? He was just going through the motions every day, same motions every day. And God came to him, and the call of the gospel is a call to adventure. Is anybody going to dispute me if I tell you that the call of the gospel is for you to step outside of the 21st century North American comfort zone and do something extraordinary? Anybody disagree with me on that? He's calling us to more than what your neighbor has, except with a higher, better smile on it. He's calling us to a higher level of commitment. He's calling us to be ambassadors. Have you ever wanted that job? Moses could send out that application. Anybody here ever want to be an ambassador? That'd be cool. You know, I've thought about that before. I applied one time for the work with the government overseas, and I thought, man, that'd be cool to be the ambassador. And it is pretty cool to think about being the ambassador to France or England or something. But do you want to be the ambassador to Yemen? Anybody want to volunteer for that one? How about the ambassador to Lebanon? Everybody up for that one? How about for the ambassador to Sudan? Anybody want that one? The ambassador to Baghdad. You ready? Who's signing up? Syria, right. I want to go to Syria today. Okay, so the life of the Christian is a call to be an ambassador, but it's not always to France or England. We sometimes have to be the ambassador to those that we would rather not ambass to. Is that not a word, ambass? If you're an ambassador, you have to ambass, right? So we're not always going to like the job. And here comes Moses, and God says to him, I'm going to send you to Pharaoh. And Moses said, wow. And he starts raising his objections. And we're going to see now that Moses is going to raise 5 objections. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. I know 5 is a large number, but God wrote it, I didn't. Okay, So, number one, he says, who am I? Okay, that's a really important question, and it was the right first question. I think what's implied by the question, and if you read the question carefully, it's implied, I am not the guy to go to Pharaoh. I'm not the right one. He says, who am I to go to Pharaoh? In other words, I'm too insignificant to go to Pharaoh. Now, keep in mind, he was Pharaoh's adopted son. So whoever's Pharaoh now, after the old Pharaoh died, is probably his stepbrother. Yeah? Maybe even his full adopted brother. So now he's being called to go back and to tell his brother a message. Who am I? Well, you're his brother. That's who you are. Do you think God had anybody closer to him? Do you think God had a better idea? You're his brother. Go talk to him. Any of us would have picked Moses for that job. I know you're estranged. I know you've been away for a while, but at least you speak the language like a Pharaoh. You know the culture. You know the people and the parties involved. You know the land. You know the real estate. You know all of this stuff. You're the right guy for this job. And he says, oh, who am I? Do we ever do that? Oh, who am I? And you know, you'd expect, if I was God, I would say, I'll tell you who you are. You're the guy I've set up for the last 80 years to do this job. I've been preparing you for 80 years to do this job. Don't whine at me. Get a going. God doesn't say that. Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, or I could read it here if I have to. So he said, I will certainly be with you. So the answer to the question of who am I is nobody unless I'm with you. He's the brother to the Pharaoh. He's the guy who has all the right education, all the right qualifications, all the right lineage. He's the right guy for the job. And God says, you're right, you're nobody, but if I go with you, it'll be okay. So it doesn't matter what God has prepared you for the last, maybe you haven't had 80 years yet, but maybe you have. Those of you who haven't had 80 years, he's been preparing you for however many years it is. And God says, now I'm ready for you to take your place and do your job. And we say, oh, I'm nobody. I can't do that. And he says, that's fine. I can use nobodies because I'm going with you. And he's going with you. And that's all of the qualifications that you need. Who am I is the first objection, and the answer is the one I'm going with. And this shall be a sign to you that I've sent you when you've brought the people out of Egypt. You shall serve God on this mountain. In other words, God just made him a promise. And if he learned anything at the feet of his mother, he had to learn that God's promises are true. His God promises to Abraham were true. His promises to Isaac were true. All the way down to Israel were true. He even promised that they'd be in bondage for 400 years. And here they are. Then Moses said to God, indeed, when I come to the children of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers sent me, and they say to me, what is his name? A really important question. Okay, first question was, who am I? And the second question is, well, who are you? Who are you, God? And God has an answer, but before we get to his answer, just know that Moses has asked the right two questions. Am I the guy for this job? Yes, because I will be with you. And number two, who is it that is sending me on this mission? What shall I say to them? And God gives him the answer. He says, and God said to Moses, I am who I am. Now, that means a lot more to them than it means to us. We don't even know all the things that it meant to them, but it clearly meant to them at the very least that he was the one that was all existent. Remember that they were living in Egypt where there was a pantheon of idols that the Egyptians worshiped. Somebody said there's between 30 and 50 gods that they worshiped in Egypt. And you remember, as soon as they got out and they got scared, they immediately built a calf, one of the Egyptian gods. They built one of the Egyptian idols in order to deliver them and have somebody they could look at and say, that's our God. So in the 400 years, the children of Israel had forgotten a lot about God. And they'd been polluted by a lot of idol worship. And they were confused about who God was and who the gods were. And God says, let me tell you who I am. I am the one who is not an idol. I am the one who really is. I'm the one that doesn't need an image built to me. I'm the one that you don't have to draw pictures of. I'm the one that you don't have to create a wooden or a stone image of. I'm the one that you don't have to conjure up. I'm the one who really is, not the one who you made up. And so he says, that's what you'll tell the children of Israel. You tell them, I am that I am. Moreover, God said to Moses, the Lord shall say to the children of Israel, thus shall you say to the children of Israel, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. So he ties the all-existent one back to the one that you've been talking about but have forgotten about. The one you have learned about but have not had a relationship with. The one that your fathers and your forefathers worshiped but you have lost touch with. That's the one I am. And he says, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial to all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, appeared to me saying, I have surely visited you and seen what is done to you in Egypt. And I have said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, Amalekites, Perizzites, and Jebusites, and to a land flowing with milk and honey. And then they will heed your voice, and you will come, and the elders of Israel to the king of Egypt, and you shall say, O Lord God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now, please, let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness that we may sacrifice to our God. But I am sure that the king of Egypt will not let you go. No, not even by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all my wonders, which I will do in its midst. And after that, he will let you go. And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And it shall be when you go that you'll not go empty-handed. But every woman shall ask of her neighbor, the one who dwells near her house, articles of silver, gold, and clothing. And you shall put them on your sons and on your daughters. And so shall you plunder the Egyptians. Then Moses, okay, third objection. Remember the first objection is, who am I? God says, the one I'm with. Doesn't matter. Have you ever imagined being on the red carpet at the Academy Awards? Pick your star. You're with Russell Crowe. Okay? Do you think anybody cares who you are? Who was that on the red carpet? I don't know, somebody with Russell Crowe. Right? Who is it went to the Egyptians? I don't know, somebody with God. It's a movie staple, isn't it? That the little wimp stands up to the bully and the bully runs away and then the wimp turns around and there's somebody even bigger behind him. So it's a movie staple. And he says, so objection one, who am I? Objection two, who are you? And objection three, suppose they won't listen to me. Suppose they won't listen to me but say, you're making this up. God has not appeared to you. And then God gives him some signs. He says, so the Lord said, what's in your hand? He said, a rod. And he said, cast it on the ground. So he cast it on the ground. It became a serpent. And I love that line there, don't you? He ran like a little girl. Okay, it doesn't say exactly that. And then the Lord said to Moses, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. And he reached out and he caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. That they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to you. Furthermore, the Lord said, now put your hand into your coat. And he put his hand into his coat, and when he took it out, behold, it was leprous like snow. Now, we don't know what that is today. We have to kind of interpret a little bit. Everybody's been seeing the Ice Bucket Challenge, right? It's everywhere these days. That's to bring your awareness. I don't understand how it actually raises any money. I haven't figured that out yet. But anyway, it brings awareness to a disease called ALS, formerly known as Lou Gehrig's disease. It's a disease that we have no cure to, and it means a period of complete loss of all dignity, all bodily control, and death. It's a horrible thing, right? Everybody agree with me that's a horrible thing? That's exactly what Moses was looking at. Moses was looking at a humiliating death sentence. He had leprosy. It was going to be death for him. It was going to be a horrible, humiliating, embarrassing, painful, and tedious death with parts of his digits falling off of his body one by one until he was nothing but a stump. When he saw that, that was serious business. I think what God was saying to him is, look, I can take a dead piece of lumber that you have in your hand, and I can make it alive, and I can take you and I can make you dead. I have control over life and death. If they don't listen to you, don't worry about that, because I control life and I control death. I can create life and I can kill. I can do it all. Don't be anxious about whether they believe you or not. Just know that I'm in charge of life and death. And it goes on, he says, it was restored like he put his hand back again. When he pulled it in, he drew it out. It was restored like the other. He was healed. Then it will be, if they do not believe you or heed the message of the first sign, they may believe the later sign. In other words, if they don't believe life, I've got another sign for them. Ouch, kind of a threat, isn't it? He says, I'll convince them one way or the other. It's not your problem to convince them. It's your problem to do what I tell you to do. I will show them by life, or I'll show them by death to believe you. And it shall be, if they do not believe these two signs or listen to your voice, that you shall take water from the river and pour it on dry land, and the water which you take from the river will become blood on the dry land. Then Moses said to the Lord, fourth objection, my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow. So he's saying, listen, God, I've always had a speech impediment. I chuckle sometimes. Those of us who were born in North Texas, or Texas, I was born in San Antonio. Those of us who were born in Texas, we lived here all of our life, we think we're pretty cool. We do, trust me. And yet, this room is full of people who have come here from other places and know 2, 3, and 4 languages. And we North Americans know what? Moses clearly spoke Hebrew, yeah? His mother taught him Hebrew at birth. He clearly spoke Egyptian. He had a PhD in Egyptian whatever. And he was living in Midian. So some form of Arabic or Aramaic. He was also, so he clearly spoke 3 languages. Oh Lord, I am not eloquent. My speech is not good in any of my 3 languages, even the one I have a PhD in. Really? We sometimes want to bring up whatever our weakness is to God. Well, Lord, I'm not a very good athlete. Can't really play basketball with the guys, I don't think a sports ministry is for me. I'm not very good at this, or I'm not very good at that, or I can't do that, or I can't do this. And you know what God said? In the next verse he says, so the Lord said to him, who made your mouth? He said, who makes people mute or deaf or seeing or blind? It was not me. I can make you anything I want you to be. Don't whine to me about what you can and can't do, because I will make you do whatever I want you to do. Friends, do not tell God about your weaknesses. Ask God for strength. Don't let Satan tell you that you are ill-equipped to do God's work, because God will equip you to whatever work he calls you to do. And he says, now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth, and I will teach you what to say. And this is his fifth. His last fifth, he says, oh my Lord, please send somebody else, anybody else. Send somebody else to do this work. And at this point, God got mad. It says the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. But wait, that's not the whole story. This is so beautiful. While God is getting mad, he has already answered Moses' prayer weeks before. Because he says, listen, Moses, don't try my patience. By the way, I already got your brother Aaron on the way to do your helper work. He says, he's already on the way. Look at that next verse. He says he's already coming to meet you. When he sees you, he'll be glad in his heart. So here's God getting upset because Moses is beginning to try him. And I think it's just a cue to Moses to shut up. And he says, Moses, don't try me, but I understand you want help. I have already brought you a helper. He's on his way. He's going to be here tomorrow. So the objections that we raise to God, he has already prepared the answer for before we even knew that we were going to object. If you need a helper in your work, God has already provided a helper. The helper is on the way. If you need a person to work with in the ministry God has chosen you to work towards, he has already provided the helper for you.